Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourself and welcome to the Work of Design Live from Studio Designer, the industry's leading project management and accounting platform for the interior design industry. I'm Jamie Brown, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just so you're aware, the session is going to be recorded today, so that way, if you need to go back and reference anything, it will be available to you after the session. And if you have any questions throughout, we have a really exciting topic today. Feel free to pop them in the chat below and we'll go through them during the Q&A session at the end. Just a bit of an introduction on Studio Designer. So at Studio, our mission is to empower creativity by developing business management solutions to help designers see their full potential. We launched this Work of Design webinar series to share design business advice, best practices, and encourage knowledge sharing in our community. To deliver the very best content, we will be partnering with thought leaders and experts in the industry to share their expertise on running a successful design firm and to grow our collective knowledge. Today, I'm really excited to be able to introduce one of our partners, Erica Weyenberg, an interior designer and head of research and content for ThinkLab. Erica embraces design thinking with a career that has encompassed interior design, sales, strategic program development, marketing management, and consulting within the world of design. Today, she's going to be sharing some valuable insights relating to ThinkLab's most recent research study on the interior design industry. I'll pass it over to you now, Erica, to get started.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you everybody for dialing in. I am honored and really excited to run through this research with you all today. We do have quite a bit to get through, and I will let you know that because Studio Designer has been a great partner to ThinkLab, and many of you may have even participated in this research. So this is a really fun opportunity for us to kind of close that loop, close that circle, and give back the aggregate feedback from which this research came. So a little bit about myself and about ThinkLab. Like Jamie said, my career started, I am a degreed interior designer, and that's where my passion has always been, is in the world of design. But I've seen multiple roles within this industry, and now I get to sit in this wonderful place at ThinkLab where I lead our research and content team in researching the world of design. So our mission is really to help connect the ecosystem that surrounds architects and designers with architects and designers. So that means getting your voice directly to get your feedback and help distribute that back out to the brand partners, the distributors, all the people that support your work so that we can have a more connected and successful industry holistically. So that's really where I sit. ThinkLab is the only, as far as we can tell, research firm that is solely focused on the interiors industry. So this is a team built up of those who have a background in either interior design or industrial design. So we're all very passionate about this space. So that's a little bit about us. Now, a little bit about this research. This is an annual study. This actually hasn't been published yet. So you all get the fresh eyes sneak peek. And I will say, because of some of my conversations with Jamie leading up to this discussion today, I've added in some extra research from all the things that I do that won't be in the public version, but is here for you today. So you'll have access to some bonus information, if you will, in this presentation. As Jamie said, please feel free to enter your questions as we go, and I'll address as many of them at the end of our discussion today, but we'll go ahead and dive in. You can kind of think of this as a state of the union, if you will, for the interior design industry, just looking at how things are changing. Whether incrementally in small pieces year over year, or in some places, there have been major shifts, especially over the course of the last couple of years. So we'll go ahead and look at what all we'll uncover here today. So broken into sections, and this report will be publicly available at the end of February. So you won't see a couple of the slides that I've included here, but there is actually a larger report that has additional slides that are easy to run through on your own, that you can flip through At the end of February, that will be launched from our website. And I know Jamie will be asking at the end for a poll. So if anybody wants that information, wants to participate in our research, make sure you fill out the poll at the end of the webinar today so that we can inform you of when that goes live. So the first section, and here you can see we had over 1,300 respondents. You can see Studio Designer was a partner of ours in distributing this survey out to this audience. So if you participated in the survey, thank you. A genuine thanks from all of us because you're what fuels this research. So you, along with 13 other industry members, participated in this research this year. Now, at a very high level, before we dive into kind of some of the nitty-gritty data, what are some of the key shifts that we've seen year over year since we do this study every year? We're able to track, kind of micro and macro changes. One was that there has been an increase in the designer profession overall, which is really encouraging to see because we saw a little bit of a setback in the number of people choosing this profession over the course of the pandemic and those first couple years into the pandemic. So it's great to see the employment numbers have fully rebounded and are above where they were previously. We also see that 41% of designers employed at firms. So this goes beyond if you are a solopreneur, you have your own business but don't employ other people. Think about firms as, major office locations, things like that. Of those firms, about 41% of designers are employed at the interior design giants of design. So that's also a body of research that we are the data nerds behind the scenes that collect that research, analyze that research every year. So it's interesting to see just how influential those top 200 firms are in terms of the sheer volume of work that goes through those firms. A rising pain point for everyone across the industry, whether you focus on residential work, equally residential and commercial, or non-residential work, is that there is pain points around pricing and timeliness. Have had so many conversations with industry members saying, I don't know what anything costs anymore. All costs are out the window. All of my historical databases of information of what something should be roughly about, including install, including white glove delivery, all of that information is out the window because things have changed so rapidly over the course of the last couple of years. And getting that pricing is also taking time because you've got so many requests coming into local reps and customer service representatives at the manufacturers. So we know that that is a rising pain point for you all. So if you feel that, know that you are not alone. You are squarely with your colleagues within the industry. We also started tracking a couple of new measures this year, and one of them was just the demand for both healthy spaces and sustainable products. And what's really exciting from our perspective is to see that not only does ThinkLab research validate this growing demand, but we've seen other macro level consumer research from McKinsey and Company that points to kind of a real consumer level shift in the value spectrum and valuing sustainable products and that healthy built environment more and more. So that's exciting to see from our perspective. And then as far as prioritizing what is most important in your work, this is another thing that we just started benchmarking this year. So we don't have a year-over-year comparison just yet, but what we saw was that the number one thing that gets prioritized is the ease of doing business, which is not surprising to us because whatever we can do to make ourselves most efficient and most effective in our work is obviously going to, give us time back for other things in our day. So that's some of the key shifts that we've seen comparatively to last year, but let's go ahead and dive into the economic power of design. So I have the privilege of speaking with brands that support the interior design industry. And one of the key things that I love to present to them is these next couple slides, because it really shows just how impactful your role is, not just within the built environment, not just within this industry, but economically overall. So in the US market, for commercial and residential projects combined, there is $383.7 billion worth of product each year that are either directly or indirectly influenced by the interior design profession. That's a lot of spending power. So your decisions matter immensely. And when you see this next slide, you'll see from a actual quantitatively backed up data point, what we see here is that if you look at the average consumer and what their disposable income is, what their money is that they can actually spend at the end of the day, we're going to call that 1x. The average designer across our industry specifies 40 times that dollar volume every year. And when we present this to brands that support this industry, their eyes light up because all of a sudden they knew that designers were influential and important people to really build a trusted relationship with. But when you see that their average influence is 40 times that of a consumer, it puts tremendous power, excuse me, in your seat as that influential decision maker and setting the tone for what comes next. As we look at the profile of the interior design profession, excuse me, I've been talking a lot today, so I'm so sorry. But as we look at the interior design profession overall, in our industry, we see that this year there were 94,900 designers in the United States, which represents a 1.8% year-over-year increase, which is pretty strong growth for the industry overall. That's more than just a moderate add to our industry. So, like I said, good to see people kind of flocking back to this profession, seeing it as a viable opportunity for their future. And then of those 94,900 designers, this is the breakdown of where they work. Now, why I show this slide is because I think for a lot of designers, it can feel sometimes like a lonely existence. As a solopreneur or as a small team, it can feel like you're a little disconnected, maybe from other firm leaders, from other designers out in the space. And your gut sense there is absolutely right, because what we see here is that 83% of our industry are very small firms, 0 to 4 employees. We are an incredibly fragmented industry, but that's why industry associations, things like this, where we can get together, come together, learn from each other, matter so much, because it's really our collective whole and knowledge that helps to elevate all of us. But seeing this, hopefully that gives some perspective to why it can feel like there's so many small individual teams within this industry. Now here, these are just some of the, hot locations for the number of, the sheer number of designers within these major metropolitan areas. I don't think any of these would be particularly surprising. These are, pretty large metro areas that don't just house a lot of designer employment, they house a lot of employment overall in general. But what I want to show you is, interestingly, so these cities have a lot of designers, but these cities here, this is kind of next level design nerd, if you will, but the location quotient shows us where you have a higher than average percent of designers. So these represent markets that are very design rich. So more, if the average across the country is 1 designer, in Naples, Florida, there are 4.85 designers comparatively to the national average. So it's just interesting to see where these may not represent the top markets from a volume size of the number of designers, but these do represent markets where design thinking is really rich, where there is probably a really great local community of designers where you can kind of connect and learn from one another in these markets as well, even if you aren't in New York or San Francisco or Chicago. So we're already going to jump into section 3 And this is where I think that hopefully you'll see some interesting data that maybe validates some of what you're feeling, points a little bit to the future of what we can expect to see. So we'll go ahead and dive in here as well. What we saw this year was that residentially, for firms that were focused solely on residential work, the average workload was about 21 projects per year. Now, this was down 2 projects. It was 23 last year, but don't be discouraged, because what we also saw is the projects have gotten bigger, which I think is really encouraging. And on those designers that are equally split between residential and commercial work, they had an average of 16 projects this past year. Again, down 2 projects from the year before, but I don't see this as a net negative. I think that what we see here is that the majority of residential project budgets this year are between $100,000 and $500,000. Comparatively, last year, the average was $50,000 to $100,000. So that's really a positive shift. Doing a few less projects, but far greater dollar volume in those projects means that you're diving deeper, doing more spaces, and maybe even expanding into other homes for the same client, things like that. But I think that that's a really healthy indicator for our industry. More isn't always more. When it's more projects, but they're all so small that you're just trying to balance too many things, this is actually a really positive shift in my mind. Now, how the projects are broken down for those budgets, it's remarkably almost exactly into thirds between design and consulting fees, the furniture and fixtures that are being purchased, and the construction. So that's typically on average where things have broken out. It's not vastly different on the non-residential side, but I think that this is actually very, very balanced. And it's good actually to see this, because this is also a shift. A couple of years ago, the construction costs were so high that that was taking up a much larger portion of the budget. So it's great to see that design fees and other consulting fees are really rounding out that first third. Now, what is the appetite? How eager are clients to invest in architectural and design services? This, again, is a new measure this year, but we're really very excited to see this. Now, the red line represents extremely eager. You know, everybody wants those clients, of course, but I think that that will always be a somewhat smaller bucket. But when you see eager or average, only a few percentile here in the tentative or extremely tentative as far as their appetite in wanting to invest in architectural and design services. So less than a quarter of clients being in that kind of tentative, weary state, also a really positive measure that projects will be moving forward. Now, where are we tracking as far as construction? What's hot, what's growing? When you look at this chart, your first glance might be to say, oh my gosh, negative 16% in single family residential construction. That seems terrible. But when you look at the course overall, if you look back to where we were here in 2019 at $280 billion put in place new construction, and this year we're at $315 billion, that's $35 billion ahead of where we were a few years ago. That's actually great growth. We just saw such a ridiculous surge over the course of the pandemic that now the trend lines are really right-sized and kind of leveled out. So don't see it as necessarily a negative. We're still on track for a normal kind of growth curve here, but this does give some perspective into the shift between ground up new home construction versus renovation work. And we see also, Jamie and I were just talking about this, with the interest rates and things that are kind of playing into homeowner decision-making right now, renovation work is poised to do really well over the next couple of years while those interest rates kind of settle down and hopefully create some opportunity for more ground up construction for single family homes. Now, where people are moving, that of course means there is business awaiting for design work. So this gives you a quick glance at kind of where people are headed and where they are leaving. California tends to top the list of places where people are leaving, not because they don't love the sunny weather, but because the cost of living is so high. And with the flexibility of hybrid work environments and some companies adopting remote work policies, things like that, some California residents are able to move to neighboring states and achieve a lower cost of living overall. So that's a big driver there for why people are leaving California. But what's interesting is to see where they are moving are not major metropolitan areas. It's not New York. It's kind of smaller markets that offer access to a secondary or kind of tertiary level city. So a very commutable city where you could live in the suburbs and commute in 20 to 30 minutes, not an hour to 2 hours sort of thing. So really that commutable city type state, and also have easy access to the great outdoors. That's a huge driver that we have continued to see as one of the many impetus for moving is really access to the great outdoors. So that's why you see some of these coastal and more, I guess, easy access to wilderness type states. South Dakota even making it onto the list for places where people are moving, but great places to keep track of, especially, if you go a little bit more granular on the city level, these are places where there's a lot of people, kind of moving into these cities where it's creating an influx of new residents, not just existing homeowners. So more potential new business. And then as we look at kind of a barometer from the architectural and design industry as to where they think things are headed, this is this graph here, essentially it charts your level of optimism in some ways for what the future holds. Do you see business increasing? Do you see an increase in new inquiries and new booked business? Or are things kind of slowing down? So this ebbs and flows naturally over time. You can see where we had a huge drop that first quarter of COVID, but you see things are actually trending upward again, which is great to see that we're, as an industry as a whole, backlogs are filling up a bit. More and more inquiries are coming in, and more new projects are getting signed off on a regular basis. So this looks like a really positive trend towards good activity starting out 2024 and, kind of continuing out throughout the rest of this year. Now, these last couple of slides will not be in the publicly released report. So, that you've gotten a snapshot here. And if you need me to follow up with these slides, I'm sure I can do that as well. I'm sure Jamie can help facilitate that as well. Now, one extra slide here before we jump from firm level to the individual interior designer level is to look at how firms are operating on this work status prediction, because this has been a tough thing for a lot of companies to wrestle with, and it's no different for our industry. So what we see is that on the residential sector, a lot of firms, the majority here, almost a third, are in office 5 days a week. Now, the remainder are really on, either a fully remote or that 2 to 3 days in the office, 2 to 3 days out of the office. This is a balance that we're tracking and we have seen moving forward. Overall, as an industry, it tends to be about 73 or 74% of designers are 2 to 3 days in the office, 2 to 3 days at home. So the solely residential side does tend to be in office slightly more than that. But it's good to see that this is, really in keeping with the whole industry. And I think that it's a great thing for some firms when it comes to recruiting. You've got more designers to help bring on as design assistants and expand your teams, and having that access to those outside of maybe what would have solely been kind of a very landlocked geographic region. It could open up new possibilities for your team in that way as well. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the personal profile of interior designers, and then, hopefully round out our time quickly with how designers are working today, and then get to all of your questions as well. So as far as an age and a demographic cut, this is interesting in the sense that our industry has actually become much more balanced over the last couple of years. We really have uh, much less of a sliding scale, kind of sliding off a cliff, and much more of an even distribution. But what I do want to call your attention to is the need for succession planning, or kind of growing your staff up through your organization, because we do have, let's see, 18 and 14, we have 32% of designers within our industry are between 55 and older. So we do have a need to take a look at what comes next. How are we grooming the next level of management and leadership and things like that? So I think that that's something that you all are very focused on if you're engaged with Studio Designer, is to not just the creative side of design, but the business side of design as well. But just wanted to call your attention to that as well. But it's great to see that we also are having more entries of Gen Z designers into this space as well, with them representing 9% of our industry already. Now, of those interior designers, some of them came to this right from the start. And some of those designers have come from a variety of different educational backgrounds, some without a formalized background in design or related industry at all. So interesting to see here kind of what that balance is and how our industry attracts from multiple different disciplines, across the spectrum. Now let's look a little bit at how designers work. This might give you a group therapy moment to feel like you can resonate with your fellow colleagues out in the industry. What are the key things that are taking up the most of your time? What we see on the residential side of our industry is that sourcing and selecting and completing those drawings, completing visuals to represent design intent, those two are almost tied, 28 and 29%. But what a huge amount of time that is. Now, obviously, many of us would say, well, yeah, that's kind of the work of design, is selecting all the right pieces and then visually communicating that to our clients. What we do at ThinkLab is to advocate back to the brand partners within the industry, especially in this golden section here of 29%, to say 29% of their week is communicating visual intent. You need to have beautiful images, you need to have downloadable files, you need to have all the drawing files at their disposal. We really are trying to advocate to make that 29% of your time at least as efficient as it can be, by encouraging the brand partners within our industry to support you well in communicating that visual intent. Now, we've seen some shifts here, actually. These are the products that are specified on the majority of your design projects. So we asked designers, of the following categories, how many of them are you specifying on the majority, 75% or more of your projects? What we saw is that flooring, interestingly, dropped this year, both residentially and non-residentially, which is kind of a surprise. But maybe it was because so much of flooring was pulled forward in that initial rush of renovations over the last couple of years. So it could be a nuance to, again, kind of right-sizing, leveling that out. But we did see flooring fall a little bit lower for, you can see it's still at 88%. 88% of designers say they're specifying flooring on the majority of their projects. But that was quite a bit higher last year. So an interesting note there. But you can see how things kind of taper off as far as what's being specified on each of your projects. Biggest product specification challenges. Everybody loves a good pain point. Not really, but it's good to feel like you are not the only one out there that's having that struggle, right? So right now, again, to that 29% I was just preaching about, 29% of your time is communicating visual images. Well, the number one pain point is finding appropriate imagery, finding BIM files, to be able to communicate those selections. That means our industry is ripe for improvement there to help support you better. If that's your number one challenge, and you're also seeing that takes up so much of your time, that's a real area of improvement. You also see here the other top challenges are getting pricing in a timely fashion, getting samples, and preferred exclusive to the trade pricing. Again, getting that pricing back from the brands that you're working with. Here's that benchmark about where do we see the appetite for healthy spaces and sustainable products. What's interesting here is that we have decreasing and greatly decreasing were options that were given, and not a single person out of the 1,300 selected decreasing need or greatly decreasing need for healthy spaces and sustainable products. So, and really you can see it's actually quite a small percentage relatively that say that it's staying the same. The majority of designers within our industry see that this demand is increasing or greatly increasing, especially over the next 2 years. And then what's that personal priority of designers when looking at the product selection process? Here, the options were things that meet your sustainability goals, things that meet your financial goals, ease of doing business, or time efficiency. And again, I think that the ease of doing business rose so highly here. 47% of residential designers said that that's their number one priority. And it's probably because a lot of you have so much work to do. You've been incredibly busy over the last couple of years, that anything that makes that ease of doing business a smooth, seamless transition, certainly that's going to be a top priority. That goes right in line with what we see in other studies as well, that trust in a brand and trust in your reps is a key priority in how you're even filtering down to those products in the first place. You have to be able to trust your brand partners that you're going to not only be able to specify those great products, but that they have your back on the back end should anything go awry in the process. Now, I will say, and we can get you this link as well, but if you want to learn more about our specifier personas, we've done a huge study to understand what the behaviors of designers are. And this is something that's very commonly done in the consumer industry to understand kind of what people's preferences are, what their driving motivators are, things like that. If you want to learn more about that or take our quiz to figure out which specifier persona you are and how you value things and prioritize things as a designer, we can get you that link as well. Now, what do you need? What do you need as far as tools, resources to do the work that you do day in and day out? Well, one of the things that we track over time is where are you going to get inspiration versus where are you going to get information? And that front end, when you're just looking to be inspired, spark some curiosity, maybe bring something new into your projects. The industry is really looking at trade publications and magazines for inspiration, showrooms and design centers, and then some social media, as well as manufacturers' websites. Those kind of round out the top sources for inspiration, but we know that it's kind of almost the exact opposite when you're looking for information. Once you've moved from this spark of creativity of where your design concept is going to now I need the actual product information, dimensions, what's the lead time, what's my trade discount. When you're looking for all of that information to back up your specifications, then you're kind of going to a whole different set of places, with manufacturers' websites and manufacturers' reps being your number one and number two resource for information. Now, as trade publications and magazines were number one on the list for inspiration, we let designers weigh in about where are they going for that inspiration overall. So you can see here, overall interior design and is number one on the list, followed by Architectural Digest and Metropolis. Now, residentially, it's a little bit different, with Architectural Digest being the first, followed by Interior Design, and then Luxe Interiors and Design as the third most highly referenced trade publication or magazine for inspiration. Software. We can't do what we do without technology anymore. So what are the platforms that are most often being used for residential designers as far as the drawing component of design goes? AutoCAD and SketchUp are still at the top of the list for that portion of the creative process. For the business side of design, Studio Designer is still the most common business software tool, which is great to have you all here. And there's a reason they're number one, because they're providing you certainly a lot of value within the business of being a designer, but also hopefully in providing extra value through their outreach to you as well. Biggest business challenges. So we saw the biggest specification challenges, excuse me. What are the biggest business challenges that you're dealing with? Right now, it's kind of this trifecta, if you will, of the need to earn appropriate fees, right? To underscore the value of design and really present that back to your clients in a way that they can understand and feel good about that investment, that this is an investment, this isn't a sunk cost. This is really, it brings so much more value to your space. So that's number one, is earning those appropriate fees. But kind of tied for second place here, you see dealing with increased client demands. They want it. They want more done faster, with more options, more iterations, and then creating new or diversifying their business. I think that has been a challenge, especially over the last couple years, as the markets have been quite rocky overall. My hope is that going into next year, we see that shrink back a little bit as things have kind of settled, as we see some real positive indicators of homeowners investing more heavily into bigger projects and to new spaces, and having that renovation work really kick off in a large way this upcoming year. So my hope is that getting that new business maybe hopefully falls off just a little bit, and hopefully the need to justify your fees also falls off a little bit. I don't know that I can help with the increased client demands. We live in an Amazon mindset now, and people are so used to the instantaneous nature of so many facets of our life that I'm sure you all feel it on a daily basis. Here to support you any way that I can, but I don't know that that one will shrink back year over year, but our hope is certainly that the other two at least do. So that concludes the run through of the slides that I have for today. Again, this is a much larger study, but nobody needs me to talk for any more than I already have. So I will open it up to questions. Jamie, if anything's come in, I'd be happy to answer things.
Thanks, Erica. That was really, really interesting. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions. We had one come through from Michael in the audience, and I think this relates to your slide of where people are moving in and moving out. But he asked, does this include moves within the actual state itself? We're seeing a lot of that within California in particular.
Yes, these are, so on the city level, you'll see that is, that would be more reflective there. So where you might see people leaving San Francisco, it's not necessarily captured that they might be moving to Oakland or, moving to Daly City or something like that. So in the city level, that is going to be a much more accurate, kind of very select view of the individual markets within the state that are experiencing growth or contraction. On the state to state level, that really looks on holistically, what is the number of taxpayers within our state, and are they growing or declining based on are people moving in or moving out, So that is, the state level is going to be more of a macro indicator, but California is such a large state with such a huge population that I would say for that state in particular, or a state like Texas, where you have just so many people within one state, looking at more of those city by city measures is probably an easier way to kind of decipher where internally movement is happening within the state.
Perfect. Thank you. We have another question from Katie who says, I'd be interested to know the trending design fees for residential solo designers. Do you have any data on that and also relating to how designers are billing?
Great question, Katie. And I appreciate that question. We don't have we don't have survey data points that I can share with you on that today. However, this is something that we do track. I will share some anecdotal response though, so that I don't leave you kind of hanging empty-handed here. What I have heard is that there has been, there is still a kind of a great divide, whether it is billing on a consulting hourly fee, billing on a project-based fee, or billing for your time plus product. There isn't one true north, I would say, moving forward. What I have seen is that it kind of comes down to personal preference in some ways. I have had some designers I've spoken with that say, I personally can't handle the weight of time tracking. So I have gone to project-based fees because I just don't have, that's not my mindset. That's not something I want to spend my time doing, is looking at every billable hour. So they've, run their business in that way. I think it comes down to the size of your team. Do you have administrative assistants that can help you with billable hours if that's the route you're going? But there's no wrong way to do it. There is a really great spread across the industry. And I think what we hear, no matter how you're billing, is that as long as you're transparent and upfront with the clients are often really okay with that. While we feel as creatives like we constantly have to justify that creative output, clients are very willing to understand that that's not their wheelhouse, and they would pay a dentist to work on their teeth. They're not going to work on their own teeth. That's not their expertise. So selling that expertise and the value that is going to be an investment in the home, that are going to, get exponential more joy out of, or more functionality out of, or whatever it might be. I think that there is a willingness from clients to see that expertise. But I would say just be transparent and know yourself. I ran my own business for a while, and I went to project-based fees because I hate time tracking. So, I think that it's across the industry. There's no one right way to do it. And we still see a very, a quite even spread across those models.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question from Jacqueline, who has asked, are there any reports on designer fees per project by location?
That's a great question. I would be happy to look into that, and I can follow up with Jamie if I find anything specific to that. We are really good at scouring through a bunch of research, but I haven't seen anything. What I would say is that you should talk to your local associations. I think it's about 50, it's either 52 or 57% of residential designers replied that they were actively involved in IIDA, a smaller number involved in ASID, and a smaller number involved in IIDA. Those local chapters are often a great place to look for that kind of micro look at your local economy and how other designers are billing, because it is going to be vastly different depending on if you're in Aspen or in Omaha. So I would say I would look and ask your chapter president locally if they have any resources there for you, but I will also follow up with Jamie if I find anything.
Thanks, Erica. I have a couple of questions from Katie and Stacy, who are fellow Canadians north of the border, like me, who have asked, do you have any statistics specifically relating to the Canadian market? And if not, is that something you're planning to do in the future?
So most of our work does encompass the North American market. The reason, and we actually did have Canadian design respondents within this study, what we tend to find is that sample set is quite a bit smaller than our US sample set. So if we compare them, it's not really a fair comparison because we don't have the same number of respondents. So to say 50% of 20 people said this versus 50% of 750 people said that, it becomes a really hard comparison. Now, I will say part of why this study is US focused is also because of some of those macroeconomic indicators and things like that. We do like to include, the Canadian perspective in anything that we can. And I'd be happy if you have specific questions on specific benchmarks, I can look at what our Canadian respondents said there so that you have kind of a peer-to-peer benchmark. So Jamie, if you'd like to connect me, I'd be happy to follow up on that as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more, Erica. We'll obviously do the poll in just a second, but maybe you could tell a little bit more about the types of research studies that you do in case anyone's interested in participating.
Yes, we would love anybody that wants to just passively get our research or participate in it actively. That would be wonderful. So the types of research that we're often engaging in are quantitative, which would be like surveys. So we do surveys all the time. And if you want to become part of that research list, we do both paid and unpaid surveys. They're typically like 8 minutes or less. We try to be very cognizant of your overall workload and not bog you down with a super long survey. But we do survey work. We also do a lot of qualitative work, which involves focus groups and things like that are paid research opportunities as well. We also have in-person research initiatives, sometimes around trade shows. So it might be in a locale around a trade show where we're inviting people to become a team of secret shoppers, where I help lead a team of designers through a trade show to really look at how brands are performing to your expectations or whatnot. And Olga, who's my colleague, she just put in the chat some ways that you can engage as well. But we have a lot of ways that you can dial in, and you never need to feel like you're overcommitting. You can do one survey and never do one again if you want. You can do one focus group and never do one again if you want. But you can also just enjoy some of the findings of our research. And I would say from that perspective, two of the best places to get that research is going to be either our website. We write editorial for our website, and it goes typically in Interior Design Magazine or Metropolis Magazine as well. So if you like reading, we have a lot of written articles there that you can read. Or if you are somebody that likes to take a break and go for a walk, our podcasts are a great way to get kind of a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, hear from peers across the industry. We have Design Nerds Anonymous. And then we also have a podcast called The Learning Objective. And the Learning Objective is actually the industry's first ever CEU certified podcast. So you can actually get your CEU credits just by like tuning in, listening to the podcast, and then taking like a 3-question quiz afterwards. So if you need to up your credits, a good way to get some credits there and also hear some really interesting topics.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, and Olga is putting some really helpful resources in the chat. That's wonderful. So before we wrap up this afternoon, we're going to do a very quick poll. If any of you are interested in learning more about ThinkLab's research solutions for the design industry, or how you can become involved in a research study, you'll want to click your answer in the poll, which I will launch in just a sec. And if you're interested in learning more about Studio Designer's fully integrated platform for managing your interior design business, you'll want to fill out yes to this poll as well. So we'll launch that now, and we'll keep it open for 20 or 30 seconds just to give you guys a chance to put in your answers there.
And thank you all again for dialing in. It's really a pleasure. I always love when I get to talk to designers because that's the world I came from. And so it's really an honor and a pleasure to spend this time with you all. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And we're looking forward to reading the full report at the
Yes.
end of February, right, Erica?
End of February. Yep. Nobody else has seen any of this just yet. So
Great. That's wonderful. Okay. I think most people have got their answers in, so that's great. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to our wonderful guest, Erica. We really appreciate it. I definitely learned a lot and I hope everyone else did as well. Um, as you say, the full report will be live on the ThinkLab website at the end of February. So we can send everybody the link to that just so they can bookmark it for when it's live on the website. And from Studio Designers, stay tuned for our next Work of Design Live webinar that we're going to be hosting in February. Our guest and date will be released really soon, so keep an eye on your inbox for the next portion of the series. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erica, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.